Mr. Stone is known, I'm sure, to most of you, but I would say just a few things about his education and his practice. He was educated at the University of Arkansas, Harvard, and MIT architectural schools. In 1927, he was awarded the Roch Traveling Scholarship for 2 years of architectural study in Europe. Upon his return to the United States, he worked as a designer for several prominent New York firms, including Schultz and Weaver, Reinhardt and Hofmeister, Hood and Fuilneau, and Wallace K. Harrison. The evolution of Mr. Stone's work is marked by many significant prototypes in contemporary architecture. His identity as a versatile designer was firmly established in the 30s by such buildings as New York's Museum of Modern Art and the Conger Goodyear House. Other pace-setting buildings which have followed include the El Panama Hotel, the American Pavilion for the Brussels World's Fair, the United States Embassy at New Delhi, the Huntington Hartford Gallery of Modern Art in New York City, the headquarters for the National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C., numerous large-scale master plans for universities, cities, cultural and civic centers. I understand that there will soon be some work in Dayton. He's done dormitories at the University of Kentucky and a residence and a doctor's office here in Muncie. Mr. Stone's current projects include the General Motors Building and the City Civic Center, both in New York City, the International Trade Mart in New Orleans, the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, Washington, D.C., the New York State University Center at Albany, and the Rhode Island State Office Building Complex and Master Plan in Providence, Rhode Island. Time magazine said of Mr. Stone, Edward Durrell Stone, a pioneer modernist, undoubtedly the profession's freest spirit, and by general consensus, the most versatile designer of his generation. Mr. Stone, in addition to his full-time practice of architecture, is an author, lecturer, and professor of fine arts. His autobiography, The Evolution of an Architect, was published by Horizon Press in 1962, and he has a second book due for publication this year, Architecture, Recent and Future. I believe that we'll look forward to that book as much as we have to his lecture here today. Mr. Stone.
Go on. They can tie it on the back.
If you aren't going to move, you could just do it. If you won't move to the screen. I'll just set it here.
All right.
Will it stay?
I'm not sure this 20th century is here to stay. Thank you, Dean Sappenfield. I really had no idea I was so worthwhile. It's too bad a couple of my former wives can't be here to hear that. Transparently, I wasn't appreciated. Well, it's a great honor for me to be here, and must have been some arm twisting done, Dean, to get all these people to stay indoors on such a lovely spring day, and it troubles my conscience a little bit. I guess I might be described as sort of the Everett Dirksen of architecture. I love to talk, but without his Baroque elegance, so I'll restrain my enthusiasm and rely mostly on pictures. But I think at last the day of the architect has arrived. You know, traditionally, periods of interest in the arts and in things of cultural consequence, in short, a renaissance, have historically occurred in periods of comparative peace and prosperity and leisure. Now, we've had all these precious things for many, many years, and I've been waiting for this renaissance to come. Any great movement in thought or certainly in the arts is usually heralded by the intellectual or the artist. Some 20 years ago, I began to see signs of what is happening today. Such men as the late Henry R. Luce, editor of Time and Life, Louis Mumford, Adlai Stevenson, Walter Lippmann, John Galbraith, all were writing, and while it was clear for them to see that we had despoiled a beautiful physical heritage and that our roadsides were hideous, that our villages were neon jungles, and that our cities were utterly hopeless to live in. However, it took, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, one of your neighbors here, the late Mr. Wright. He was a transcendentalist in theory, although he spent a lot of time in New York City. But he deplored the cities, their dirt, their traffic, all the many disagreeable features. And you may recall that he said that early in life he had to decide between hypocritical humility and honest arrogance. And he chose honest arrogance, and he never had any occasion to regret it. Now, this enabled him to insult people, and especially the cities in which he was invited to appear. He was invited on one occasion to come to Boston, and he was there on the stage, on the rostrum, with a number of stodgy dignitaries. So he said, you know, what this town needs is about a dozen good funerals. On another occasion, he was in Los Angeles, and he said, if you turned the world up on its side, everything loose would end in Los Angeles. And if you've been there and see the catch-penny junk that they built over the last 30 years, you would agree. But I guess on another occasion, the city fathers of Pittsburgh invited him to visit their city. And they paid him a handsome honorarium, and finally got around to asking him what they should do with their city. Well, he said, gentlemen, there's only one solution: abandon it. Well, they took heed. They didn't abandon it, but they've done a lot since. So that the prophecies of these wise men, we should be indebted to them, are beginning to bear fruit. There's hardly, for instance, in New York City, the great Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, 3 new museums built in the last decade. In Washington, the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and in Los Angeles, the new Music Center and a new museum. So And then the cities. I don't know of hardly a city in this country that doesn't have plans for its revitalization and rebuilding. Well, all this is well and good, but traditionally, great cities have been built by emperors or kings with autocratic powers. And, Peter the Great built a very wise man, a very brilliant man. He was responsible, as you know, for the building of St. Petersburg and now Leningrad, renamed Leningrad, a very beautiful city indeed. And of course, Paris was built by the Louis and Napoleon, all autocratic rulers. So any great building, any great overall improvements in the whole country must come from our leaders. I don't think since Thomas Jefferson up until the time of President Kennedy was any president, really vitally concerned with the physical beauty of our country. Theodore Roosevelt, as you recall, was very interested in preservation of wildlife, but with that one small exception, President Kennedy, until President and Mrs. Kennedy came along, they were obviously very interested in the arts and encouraged the artist, and certainly raised the intellectual and cultural sites of our nation. But President Johnson, if you'll recall in his speech in Ann Arbor when he delineated the aims of the Great Society, among other things, said that we would rebuild our cities, that they would be places of beauty not just for the transaction of commerce, but for the inspiration and of our people. And the first time I've ever heard a president use the word beauty unabashed, said these would be beautiful places and be inspiring for the community of man. I don't know whether a lady for the transaction of commerce, but for the inspiration and of our people. And the first time I've ever heard a president use the word beauty unabashed, said these would be beautiful places and be inspiring for the community of man. I don't know whether a ladybird, there's behind every man there's a woman and surprised mother-in-law. So any great man. So she herself has done wonderful things. She's, nothing so terrifying to a male as a woman with a worthy cause. And she has all the government agencies, whether they're concerned with parks, highways, housing, whatever, they're all really very conscious of beautification. I brought along some photographs of our work, and if you'll be patient, we'll turn these lights off. This is my colleague Ed Stevens. His father was a Time correspondent in Moscow, and that's where he was born. His sister was only American to dance with the Bolshoi Theater. This is I guess I better take this speaker. This is a building in New Delhi. It's the chancery for our embassy there in India. It's a building built to be harmonious with the monuments of India. As you see, it's a building that sits on a podium or platform. Beneath that platform, all of the cars are parked. A monumental building is ruined by sitting in the middle of a parking lot. And that goes for the capital of our country, which now is in the middle of a parking lot. And I'm working on one scheme to try to get all the cars underground. Above this platform is a two-story office building, shaded by this sort of umbrella-like roof. And in light of the extreme heat there, it might be 120 degrees for 2 or 3 months on end. The roof is separated from the ceiling of the second floor, so air may pass readily through it. This exterior wall, excuse me, I'll just tap. Let's see the next slide. Or is it stuck there? This exterior wall employs a concrete grill, which now has become as commonplace as a brick. But this was the first time it was used in this manner. The gravel here is from the Ganges, the sacred river, and those shrubs were given to us by a Maharaja in the neighborhood. Columns are steel and gold leaf to recall some of the Oriental opulence. And it's built around a water garden. As you see, the 2 stories where you enter the offices around the perimeter, and then there are these islands with vegetation in the fountain. The exterior periphery is air conditioned, but this is not. This courtyard relies on the aeration of these fountains and that aluminum gold ceiling, which gives a semi-shade and a nice shadow pattern. When Mrs. Kennedy visited India, they had a dinner party in her honor up on the end balcony there, and they had musicians on all of these islands here. This is our pavilion in Brussels, in the United States Pavilion, and I guess it was 1958 or 9 exposition. It's a large building. It's 350 feet across and holds a football field, we always said. And then it's a great lagoon in front of it. This is what it looked like at night. I must, with some honest arrogance, say that it was very beautiful. The roof is interesting. We moved in 120 apple trees from the countryside, and here they are in full bloom. It really stole the show. This is the interior of the building. There were 11 giant willow trees, which the Belgians asked us to save because they'd been planted by one of their kings, probably named Leopold. They all were. So we just built the building right over the trees. It's built like a bicycle wheel. There's an outer ring and an inner ring, and then these cables, which follow the pattern of spokes, connect the 2 rings, and it's hung with a metal mesh, like a woman's mesh bag, only the individual pieces are some 2 inches in diameter. On the upper ring of spokes, or cables, we had a plastic sandwich to keep it translucent, to keep the weather out. This is a medical center and hospital in Palo Alto, California for Stanford University and hospital for Palo Alto. rather inviting place. We put compared to what most hospitals look like, we put this lagoon and fountains in. They start a focus there. These pictures, aren't they? That's better. This is just a detail of the building. It's a reinforced concrete, poured reinforced concrete because of the earthquake. We just introduced pattern work into the concrete by nailing strips on the back of the plywood panels. This is a detail of the column. This is very vigorous in scale because it was adjacent to an old quadrangle there, which had very rugged stonework. This is the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. This is a memorial to President Kennedy in Washington. This is on the Potomac River just above the Lincoln Memorial. Has a beautiful outlook over the Potomac to an island which is a set aside in memory of Theodore Roosevelt. It's a bird sanctuary, so it will always have a marvelous outlook. The central portion of this building is an opera house. One side is a theater, and one side is a concert hall. This shows the entrance to the building from the plaza. It's a big plaza. It's as big as the Piazza Navona in Rome. None of our buildings in Washington, or well, for that matter, throughout the country, have really nice access. This would be a big paved plaza with planting and fountains, and I think a building of this size deserves such a setting. This is a big building. It's 900 feet long, but by Washington standards, it's not overwhelmingly large. This is the plaza at the lower level here. You can get off undercover for the full length of that building, and you walk down these two great halls, where you come up from the parking below, and all your business is transacted there, your coats, checks, and so on. These halls, by the way, are 60 feet high and 40 feet wide. They're very monumental, beautiful halls, and one will hang the flags of the state, the other the flags of the nation. But from those you come into a grand foyer running the length of the building. That again is 60 feet high and 40 wide, but 900 feet long. I don't believe there's any room comparable to it in the world. The Hall of Mirrors at Versailles would fit easily in that middle portion there in front of the opera. The room on the left is that's a concert hall seating 2,700. The opera house in the middle, which seats 1,600, and the theater at the right, which seats 1,100. They're all small, comparatively small. They're the right size, I hope. The idea has been to make these ideal acoustically and visually, rather than to get great oversized rooms for the sake of the cash at the box office. That's a large terrace there in front of that room, so you go from this foyer out onto this terrace and have a marvelous view out over the Potomac. There'll be cafe tables and puppet shows and all things that will make it a charming place for visitors, quite independently of the three auditoriums. The roadway along the Potomac Parkway passes beneath this terrace, so literally the building is right on the water. This is a model made in our office. This is of the concert hall, seating 2,700 people. These lighting fixtures that different nations are giving us, making gifts to the center. These are lighting fixtures have been given to us by Norway. This is the opera. I wanted to do an all-red room all my life, and here it is. It has a great crystal chandelier in the middle. This is a theater, seating 1,100, which is the maximum size, incidentally, for a theater for the drama. This is a office building factory in Pasadena, California. It's known locally as the Pill Palace. They make vitamin pills there. And turn over and this is rather lush interior, but it's a room, a garden room with top light, an atrium, as we'd call it in architecture. But the visitors to this institution, this place, can walk around the perimeter on each level and see all the different manufacturing processes. Also, there's a place for the employees to have coffee breaks here, so it's not just a complete luxury. This is a pavilion and pool provided by the owner for the use of the people in the office. I was talking to my secretary in the Los Angeles office, and she told me she had her wedding reception here. She'd formerly worked there, but this has really become a civic amenity. They have all the sorts of groups meet here, so it was really a community blessing rather than just a commercial enterprise. The State Department was going to have cruise shop visit this place, so they would see that our workers weren't persecuted. But you recall he got mixed up out there with Mayor Yorty and other things, so he didn't see it. This is a new university in out of Albany, New York. It's called Albany Center, but it's a university built for 10,000 students all at once. Built all at once. We've spent $80 million already, and we're essentially got 3 of the dormitory groups built and essentially finished with the main quadrangle group, main academic group. The difference between doing a university and all at once and building it as Harvard was built over 300 years is quite a different problem. There are many things you can do, obviously. For instance, there are no automobiles on this campus. They're all parked around the periphery. There's not an automobile in that entire area other than for VIPs who may come to visit. There's one entrance. So nothing more fatal to the atmosphere of a college campus than the automobile. I see some radishes around the neighborhood here. Maybe see it again, Ed? The other one, if you know how to turn it back. With a dispersed campus, by necessity, you have to connect it all with roadways and services, even if the professors don't park on them, which they do, of course. So this is all serviced from one end, this whole academic quadrangle. There's an unloading dock. All unloading is done by electric carts brought to the individual buildings and stored where it properly belongs, and then taken up as it's needed. Also, You know, if you visit New York, you see the streets all torn up and big "We Must" signs, you know. Nothing that man has ever perpetrated has been sillier than to bury pipes in the ground and have to dig for them. So that all pipes are exposed in the ceilings of this platform on which the main academic quadrangle rests. And you can get at all plumbing, all things, and of course for an institution that'll survive hopefully for hundreds of years. This is a very worthwhile point. These are the dormitory quadrangles with 1,100 students each in three-story buildings and in towers. The three elements around that central court: one is the library, starting off with 1 million volumes, one is the theater, and one is the student union. This is something that I like very much, a formal building in a park-like setting. You know, I guess this will be compared to Versailles, or it's like the crescents and great formal architecture of Bath, England, which also has a rural setting. This elevation here is about 2,000 feet long, which, when this is properly landscaped, I fancy will look very well. Here you see it not properly landscaped, but there's the two dormitory quadrangles en route, and here the main quadrangle. See, it's nice countryside. It was formerly a golf course. This is the interior of one of the dormitory quadrangles with 3-story dormitories and a 20-odd story tower rising out of them. They're moving into this building, this group of buildings. It's in use now. New York City is building we're designing a new civic center. Those of you who know New York, that is the old City Hall in this corner to the left. Is probably one of the finest English colonial buildings in the country. Dates back to the 18th century. This is the building we're doing, and all the part, the 50-story municipal office building with the mayor's offices on the top. That's the old municipal building in the background there. This is another view of our tower with a little old City Hall there background. This is to connect the old municipal building and our new building and the City Hall. We have a sunken courtyard here where there are restaurants and shopping arcades in the manner of Rockefeller Center, which connect the three buildings. This is a civic arena in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's part of the development of the heart of that city. There are additional buildings going either side here. This is for ice hockey and boxing and stock shows and basketball. Seats from 7,000 to 10,000 people. This is another development in Frankfort, Kentucky, the capital of that state. That's a new state building, new state office building, a civic auditorium, and building here by the United States. This gives you an idea of what cities are doing to improve. This is a urban renewal project. This is all filled with obsolete buildings which are being demolished to make room for this. And this is happening all over the country. This is a building in Washington for the National Geographic Society. They're more or less an institution, and a very, very solvent group of people too. You know, that magazine doesn't pay any taxes. It's a big money maker. So their problem is to get rid of their money. to show a little black ink, and I did my best with it here. And matter of fact, when they were complaining about not having enough money, I said, why don't you borrow some money? They said, borrow money? If I'd told them to go out and bet on the horses, they couldn't have been more horrified. They're known locally as the Third National Bank. You can see that it's white Vermont marble and bronze and granite and so on. It's they went first class, as they say in some circles. This is a gallery on the first floor where they call Explorers Hall, where they exhibit, of course, their beautiful photography and their scientific developments and the results of exploration. It's a very nice place to visit. This is one of the executive reception rooms. This is a building we're building on Fifth Avenue in New York. It's opposite the Old Plaza Hotel. That's the Sherry Netherlands building there, a hotel on the left, and I'm sure the ladies will remember Bergdorf Goodman's store there on the right. So this is in a plaza. It's an extension of the plaza in the park in front of the Plaza Hotel. This is made of white marble and glass. 5 feet of white marble and 5 feet of glass. And runs 50 floors in the air. They can afford it, but to listen to them, well, you wouldn't think they could. This is, of course, Fifth Avenue is very precious frontage, so those two low pavilions are the General Motors showroom. The main block there is the building itself. And then to get shopping space, we depressed this, have this sunken garden here. So they got all this Fifth Avenue frontage. It's been a financial bonanza as far as the building is concerned. These shops rent for more money per square foot than any other shops in New York. This is a building at the University of Southern California. It's in a brick quadrangle, and this building is designed to be harmonious with the other brick buildings. I noticed here you have beautiful brick buildings. I hope you keep it that way, because I think one of the ways you can reconcile the architecture of varying periods, like Harvard Yard, is to have a scale, that is, the height of the building is essentially the same, and to have the same material. Goes a long way toward unifying a place without limiting the designer too much in style. It's for international relations, hence all these banners. This is a museum that we've done in Ponce for a wealthy man there who's given it to the town of Ponce, Puerto Rico. An interesting man. He was a graduate of MIT and the Juilliard School of Music, and he runs periodically for the presidency down there. Has had time also to be a multimillionaire making concrete. He also edits a local paper and collected this, got this collection of old masters and near old masters together, and we housed them in this building, and he again gave it to the city. This is a detail of the terrace where there'll be sculpture ultimately. This is the main entrance where you go up this curving staircase to the galleries on the second floor. This is a typical gallery. These are hexagonal in shape. You see the window here at the side. There's a window on the opposite that. But with this arrangement, you have no wall at right angles to a source of side light. So therefore, you have no reflection, which is so annoying. And then also, this arrangement enables you to have just a few pictures on a wall rather than along. This is an auditorium in Caltech. It seats 1,000 people and is used for lectures and concerts and so on. This is the interior. Again, I employed that hanging gold mesh that I spoke of in the Brussels building. That's out of focus in there. That's the City Hall in Paducah. That's Irving S. Cobb's hometown, down in Kentucky, and also Barclay's home. This is a interior with the offices all grouped around the perimeter. I'm obsessed with the dislike of corridors. I don't know when they came into architecture, but I guess in the 19th century, no architecture, ancient architecture, had corridors. In the Pompeian house, you had an atria such as this, where you had access to smaller rooms or courtyards, but always in areas where you had attractive outlook. And so it was all in the Italian palazzo. They went around courtyards to get to rooms. So whenever I can, I avoid using a corridor. And paradoxically, these beautiful spaces don't cost any more. So most any of our low-rise buildings or buildings you saw in the embassy around that water garden or here around an atria or in that factory in Pasadena. This is one of my favorite building types. This is a building for the state legislature, the House and the Senate of North Carolina. Run along here. This is the Senate chamber. This is another view of the Senate chamber. This is a rotunda between the House and the Senate. This is an office building out on Long Island for Levitt, the mass builder. Two-story building. Again with a atria in the middle of it. All offices around the perimeter. Vegetation there is a little skimpy. This is the Huntington Hartford Museum on Columbus Circle. It's a very, very tiny site, that main dimension there is 75 feet, so it was obviously necessary that it be a vertical building and I call it putting a watch together. It's very hard to have any gallery space left after you accounted for the fire stairs, the elevators, and all the legal requirements. This is furnished, as you see, it's more like a club or even a large private residence. It's a little refreshing to me after all the glaring light and white plaster of the most modern museums. This is the new Cardinal Stadium in St. Louis. This is before it was finished, which seats 50,000 people. It's down near the arch of the Sheridan Arch downtown. They cleared out a whole area of their downtown and put this stadium up and put the parking facilities around it. It really was a great did a great thing for that part of their city. But this has certain when you can make a complete circle, that's as opposed to those old horseshoe-shaped things. That's a big help in the design. But also, this field, the playing field, is some 25 feet below the surrounding street, so that it isn't a high building from the outside, and very good looking, I think. This is a hospital out in California for 100 patients. It's in a very nice residential community. But this building is again built without corridors. This, you circulate through these atriums. It's a place where the patients can sit. Ambulant patients walk around. But you come into this garden court here, and this is the access to the various parts of the room. Well, for instance, from the building, for instance, from this you go into those two-story atria. So you're never. This really got everybody said they don't want to have hospitals be institutional. Then immediately line the rooms up along corridors. That is the hallmark of the institution. And here, I don't think this looks like an institution, but more like an attractive. This is a campus under one roof. It's out on Long Island, on the site of an old airfield. But this is a sort of a herald of what the campus of the future might be, because every student comes in his own automobile, one to a car. So when you get through providing for those, there's not much left. There are 6,000 cars parked around the perimeter there on 2 decks, but with grading, they're not visible from the inner campus. This is also a college under one roof, as it were. There is no occasion. It's air-conditioned and heated year-round, of course. So there's never any occasion to go from one building to another. They're all connected under cover. So it's an all-weather campus, I guess you could call it. This is another group of buildings. We're in Boston, Massachusetts. It's the NASA Space Agency. Actually, there's going to be one tower that'll be built soon, and then the laboratories around the perimeter. This is a detail. We're doing the Capitol buildings of West Pakistan, a Secretariat building in Lahore, which is very near the place of the Indian invasion. These are study models of there are 5 of these buildings in a semicircle. It's just study of detail. That's out of focus. This is under construction now. This is the Nuclear Institute of Pakistan in Islamabad, their new capital. That circular building houses a reactor, and that tower is a water tank and fume exhaust. Around the periphery of this mobile garden, we have the laboratories and library and other academic facilities. This shows the reactor and the tower under construction. We're in the Pakistani are building a new capital in Islamabad. That's up near the foothills of the Himalayas. And we're designing this group here. The president's residence is a hill there. It's set on top of a hill. And that's his. Then below that, in that wall, are all the offices and other buildings, other functions of that nature. And this is the Parliament, and the other side is the Foreign Office. It's just a sketch looking from the reception part, the public part of the palace, back to his personal house there, his pavilion. This is a building in Beverly Hills, California. It's an office building with the windows shaded from the sun by this arcade, and it has hanging gardens at each floor, which are watered by continuous pipe. This Unitarian church in Schenectady, New York, doesn't look much like a church, but that suits the Unitarians just fine. It's a church in the round. So with this arrangement, it's sort of like a family group or so on, and puts everybody very close to the rostrum, as you see. And then around the perimeter, they have paintings or what have you on exhibit, or they serve coffee there after the service. It's a very nice feeling here. I don't know whether I desecrated the place or not. I made the first sermon there. This is a little civic center down in Arkansas, the town of Pine Bluff, Sonny Liston's hometown. This is that airport. We're doing 3 air terminals in Saudi Arabia. This one goes at Jeddah, which is the port for Mecca, is the town. There's one that's solely for the pilgrims who come there, each year. But this is the international terminal. This is just a sketch for the development of state buildings in Providence, Rhode Island. That's the state capital there. This looks like a rather dazzling looking thing. This is a new university for Pakistan. All the buildings, this is 20 years from now. There will not be as many buildings as this, but we've adopted a uniform-sized building so that they can expand in small increments. And they're all built around, each building is built around a courtyard in the tradition of that part of the country. Gives you a little idea of the corner of it. And this is one of the courtyards of a typical academic or dormitory building. So, how's that end? We got some more? I haven't heard it. What?
That's the end of this one. Do you want to go on to...
Well, I think, although I haven't heard anybody snore, it's rather trying time in the afternoon. Let's run them quickly. Everybody go out and lie on the lawns out there. Look very inviting. I was saying to Dean that one of my boyhood recollections, my mother canning fruit in these, let's go on from that. Certainly got a lot of skeletons out of our closet. Go on. No, let's go on. Where did you get all these things? This is a building at the University of Chicago, of Kellogg Foundation. Continuing education. These are conference rooms. This is the library building, which we're doing in University of Massachusetts. It's rather an unusual building. It's some 26 floors of with reading rooms. There are a series of three-story sandwiches in this building with reading rooms but sandwiched between two floors of stacks. It's all with each subject in effect a library for each large division in the book. Well, these are duplicates.
Sorry. That's what you're seeing, but it seems to be on this one too. There's another view of it.
Okay. Okay. This is a new college we're doing in Lebanon. Some called International College. It's part of the university. Then we're doing in Lebanon, we're building this campus. Go ahead, Dan. And in Alaska, we're building this one. It's quite a far cry. These are built, a good part of this. Okay. I think let's let everybody off the hook.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Nice to drive through this lovely countryside in the spring. Sure.
We would answer a few questions if we had. Well, it would seem that everyone does want to go out and lie.
That lying in the grass appeals to them. There's one.
How do you get away from corridors in a 9-story building, say a dormitory?
Well, that's a very good question. But you can, for instance, those tower buildings there at the that you saw at Albany, those square towers. Remember those 20-story buildings? They don't have any corridors in them. It could be done. Just the way you shape the building, not get into long slab buildings, along. Then a corridor is inescapable. Yes, sir.
Does the legislature of the state of North Carolina function any more effectively now since it's been one of your buildings?
Well, I've noticed a lot of inspired legislation coming out of that state.
That's a North Carolinian who asked that question.
You're a North Carolinian?
Well, if there are no further questions, we appreciate your coming here.
Thank you, Dave.
So, I would say that if any of you who come from out of town are interested, the College of Architecture, which is on the other side of the playing field, and is the building with the round windows, will be open for about an hour. We have an exhibition there of student work and Herman Miller furniture. Thank you.
Thank you.